George Washington was elected first president of the United States on April 30th, 1789. He was sworn into office on the second balcony of the Federal Hall in New York City. At the very end of copying the oath from Mr. Robert R. Livingston, George Washington said the words, "So help me God," setting a precedent for all of the future presidents. Not one president hasn't said, "So help me God," at the end of their oath. This is an example of a precedent from George Washington.
One of the problems that occurred in the U.S. when Washington was president was the judiciary system. The Judiciary Act of 1789 had to have been passed by Washington so that there could be some sort of judiciary system. Another problem he faced was the debt of the U.S. from the war. There was a lot. Also, he had to figure out the trade with other countries.
George Washington established the first presidential cabinet. It consisted of 5 people, including the president, that all played a key role in developing the early stages of the country. The cabinet had a president, a secretary of state, a secretary of treasury, a secretary of war, and an attorney general. Thomas Jefferson was the secretary of state, Alexander Hamilton was the secretary of treasury, Henry Knox was the secretary of war, and Edmund Randolph was the attorney general. The Northwest Indian War was a very important war of Washington's presidency. The Indians in the Northwest Territory were growing to be a larger and larger threat to the civilizations near the Ohio River. By the 1780s, there were nearly 1,500 deaths among hostiles from the Indians. Something needed to be done about it. The Indians dominated many small battles up to the year of 1794. The American soldiers, with a militia of 3,000, outnumbered the Indians with a ratio of 2 to 1. This battle fled the Indians and gave the Americans the victory, ending the entire war. As Washington started his presidency, both the executive branch and the judiciary branch needed to be developed. He decided to build the judiciary system first. The Judiciary Act of 1789 was an act to establish the judicial courts of the United States. The act created 13 judicial districts in 11 states. The Judiciary Act of 1789 led to many very important Supreme Court decisions in the early stages of America. During this time, the U.S. established a tax on all whiskey. This hurt the farmers because they made their whiskey from the wheat that they grew. The farmers got tired of the tax, so they rebelled. They attempted to protest against the federal government with violence and eventually firearms. Washington sent a militia to stop them, and the militia ended it. The importance of the Whiskey Rebellion is to show how the federal government is very strong and how they can enforce their laws. At the end of George Washington's second term, he decided to resign from office. By doing this, he set one of his 3 points of his farewell address. In his farewell address, he set precedents for the next presidents to come. In other words, he set a tradition. In this, he established 3 main points. His first key point was to keep a president to 2 terms. 1 term is 4 years. His next imperative precedent was not to form political parties. Therefore, he was an independent, meaning he didn't participate in one specific party. The last main idea he presented was not to form any alliances with any of the European nations. With these 3 points, Washington paved a path for all of the upcoming presidents to follow. By the end of Washington's presidency, he had rebuilt the American economy and he helped the U.S. get back on their feet. He established a lot of things that we use today, such as the precedents that he set. These precedents have set the way for all of the generations that followed Washington. He was an outstanding president, and he made the blueprints for what modern America is like today.